king, man. Hello BMW enthusiasts, and welcome to Bimmer Specialty TV. My name is Will, and I appreciate you checking out today's video. So before I get into the content, I would just like to say that if you are into BMW auto content, vintage Porsche content, maybe even you know, at this stage, who knows, some Mercedes, old Mercedes content, I would ask that you subscribe to my channel. You know, I'm going to be putting up how-tos, mods, events, just overall ownership experience videos about these types of cars. And so, you know, if you could, please subscribe. So this channel is called Bimmer Specialty TV, but I am going to, or I should say I have added a 1995 993 to the stable, to the mix, if you will. So you know, I'll figure all that out later. I don't really care that much. We'll still call it Bimmer Specialty TV, and we'll have a Porsche on here. If you're anything like me, you know, you're into all vintage German anyway, so whatever. The purpose of today's video is to introduce my 1995 911 Carrera. This car is what I would call driver quality. It's got 98,000 miles on it. I believe I'm the fourth owner of this car. I bought it from a gentleman in Omaha, Nebraska, and had it shipped here to North Carolina. So I've had this car for about a month. I've had the chance to shake it out. I've had the chance to put some money into it, which is always the case. I think when you buy a used car, there's always some sort of a surprise with it. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a second. But, you know, I don't know. I'm a BMW guy through and through, but I gotta say that this is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful cars ever made, and I couldn't be more tickled to have it. So as I mentioned, it's driver quality, so I have had no problems taking this out and just driving the shit out of it. I've driven it in the rain, and I don't really care. So that's somewhat freeing. A lot of my cars that I've had, they've been very pristine. I had an E92 M3 that I recently sold, just frankly because it was too nice to really depreciate. So thankfully this car, it's already, you know, it's already there. With all that being said, I'll tell you a little about this car. The paint on it is very good. The car has had a respray on the front bumper. I mentioned earlier, you know, some costly surprises that come up when you pick up cars like this. The oil cooler, one of these oil coolers down here is kind of clogged, and so this week actually I'm going to have the front bumper taken off. Man's going to clean the oil cooler out, and when he does that work, I'm going to have him, you know, put these seals back the way they need to be done. Headlights yellowing just a little bit. This is easily replaced. I had the chance to be out in this car last night, and frankly the headlights are lackluster anyway. I read somewhere that there is an HID upgrade for the headlights, so I'll probably be looking into that anyway. Car has a sunroof. I'm gonna knock on wood and say the thing functions perfectly, but you know, I don't know if this camera's catching it, but man, this paint is just great for what it is. I will say this, some of the seals here a little bit questionable, but thankfully, you know, you can pick those up pretty easily. I'm gonna say something that's gonna sound pretty dorky. There's just something cool about this rain channel here. God, this thing just screams, you know, classic 911. The wheels on the car, a little bit chipped up, and you know, again, I think I'm kind of excited about that because it allows me to drive the thing without really caring. Let's see, what else. So the major surprise that I had on this car is as soon as I pulled it out, and I did have a PPI done by an air-cooled mechanic out in Omaha, but it's like, you know, I didn't get a chance to put eyes on it or shake this guy down. He gave the car a clean bill of health, but when it showed up, it had an interesting kind of hesitation or stumble as I would accelerate in it. And so $1,000 later, I ended up replacing the ignition coil, one of the ignition coils on it, and that took care of the problem. So the previous owner had modified the exhaust, and it has Pfister Stage 2 mufflers, and it had a Fab Speed X pipe. That combination made this car entirely too loud. So I pulled off the X pipe and sold it for $1,000. So thankfully, the $1,000 that I put into the car was awash with what that Fab Speed X pipe fetched me on Red List when I sold it. So let's go inside the car. Pardon that, that's my camera suction cup. And by the way, I just want you to listen to this. Hopefully you can pick it up. God. That little ting, man. They talk about that, and I kind of didn't pay it much mind until I heard it myself. There's just something so cool about that. So this interior, I am very pleased with the condition of the interior. It was funny when I first got in it, I'm like, how do I open the doors? And it took me a moment to figure that out. Unbeknownst to me, the car does have an upgraded audio system in it. Another surprise that I had with this car was that the head unit is screwed up. There's a buzzing sound that comes through the stereo at varying speeds and at varying kind of points. It's hard to put a finger on it, but I do have a new unit going to be installed this week, and it's going to have all the modern amenities on it. Power seats, and you know, that brings something to mind. I like that this car screams vintage but has some of the conveniences of modern cars, such as the power seats. But man, the leather is in great condition. The smell in this car is awesome. I love the cassette holders, but I will say I've got a cup holder. It's going to go right here. I got to have my coffee, so this car does not have a cup holder right now. Usually I can find a spot to put my mug. In my E30s, like this would be a perfect spot, but that just isn't working here. I also replaced the mats shortly after I bought it. The mats that came with it are definitely in good shape, and you know, they're worth swapping out. But I came across these new Lloyd's mats, excuse this camera case here, on Rentlist. Guy had them for sale for $100, so I snatched them up. There's just something so cool about this dashboard though. So the shifter, you know, this is just something that I really like about this car. Not the actual shift knob itself, but the previous owner put a short shift kit and something called a goldenrod on it. And the thing feels like, you know, the proverbial, you know, the rifle bolt action on it. Let me also open the engine bay and show you what really makes this car special, in my opinion. It's the air-cooled engine. And so again, you know, this thing shows some use. I mean, it's not like, you know, show quality. The guy put solid motor mounts on it too. I'm not super clear on what the advantage of that is. I've never been like an expert on that kind of thing, but whatever, it's kind of cool, I guess. Okay, in the car, tell you a little bit about the driving experience. I am not a professional car reviewer. I mean, I leave that to the people who are more articulate than I am. But let's see, I will just start with the overall feeling you get when you're driving this car. So, I mean, I have owned a lot of cars. In fact, I owned another 911. I had a 997-2. It was a 2009. It was PDK. Beautiful car, stunning car. But the thing I learned about that car is you need to love every part of a car. And my challenge with that was that I bought a PDK. I really wanted a manual, but I got in a rush. And anyway, I ended up just, I could never connect with the car. So since then, I have always wanted a 911. And this one does not disappoint at all. There's just something special about this air-cooled engine. You read a lot about it, and you know, you kind of, it's just one of those things where you need to experience it. It just feels so solid. The feeling you get from driving this car is just, it's like, man, you know, I can't believe this car is 25 years old because it feels so tight. It feels so solid. I will probably end up doing some suspension mods on this car. I think the ones to have, they're coilovers, they're PSS 10s, they're Bilsteins. And you know, I think that's about a $2,700 product plus the labor to put it on. That will be in the future of this car, because back to the handling. The handling is a little bit, frankly, what I would call squishy. It's interesting though, because it's hard to describe. It feels kind of floaty, yet it is confidence inspiring. So it's like, it's a little rubbery, but you know where it's going to go. And the thing that's so amusing or so entertaining about this car too is and we all know this, but with the rear engine, the weight back there, how it pushes you forward, it kind of feels like, you know, it plants down in the rear, and then the front tires almost feel like, I mean, I guess they're lighter or something. But anyway, the handling is confidence inspiring. I have no problem driving this car at high rates of speed, and it's certainly comfortable enough for highway use too. So anyway, we've talked about the feeling this car gives you, the handling. Now I'll talk about the power. I mean, this thing is not gonna, you know, make you write home about how fast it is. I think it's certainly sufficient. This is a great example of one of those cars where it's better to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow. I had an E92 M3 that once you got it up in the RPMs, I mean, the thing was a freaking monster. That was fast. I have an X5M, an 18 X5M. That thing is shit your pants fast in a straight line. And I frankly think that this car right here has far more driving enjoyment than those two vehicles. So as far as power goes, it's definitely sufficient. I love that exhaust, by the way. It's definitely sufficient, but it's nothing that's just going to make you, you know, shit your pants. So in terms of the power delivery, you know, it does climb as you go through the revs. And this engine too is one of those where, you know, when you're pushing it high close to the red line, it doesn't feel like you're really beating the pants off of it. In other words, this is one of those engines that feels like it really lives between 4 and 6. You know, I've spent a lot of time. It's like, you know, if you're like me, you buy a car, and next thing you know, you're just obsessively reading about it online and learning about, you know, the technical aspects of it. There's a guy on Rennthusiast, he put 300,000 miles on this thing. And in that post where it talks, you know, about his experience and having that car at 300,000 miles, a lot of other guys chime in and they say, hey, you know, I have, you know, 200,000, 100,000 miles on my 993 with zero problems, and I keep it high in the revs quite a bit. So back to the power conversation, you know, I think this car does have a lot of fun above 4,000 RPM, and I don't think you're, you know, significantly, let's say, reducing the life of the engine by doing that. I think this thing was well engineered. So anyway, that's enough about the power. Air cooled, definitely thumbs up. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the comfort of this car. So when I got it, it's funny, my uncle had one of these when I was a kid, when I was in high school, and he had one, and I was like, God, that's my dream car. He ended up selling it because he said that it was hard to drive, that it took a lot out of him to drive it. And I can kind of see where he's coming from. This car requires effort to drive, right? So I love that because I'm a driver, man. If I had my druthers, I'd be freaking driving a car all the time. When I got the car, I expected it maybe not to be comfortable. I expected it to be one of those things where, hey, I'll drive it for an hour, and then I'm going to put it in the garage and not really want to get it out again. I found that not to be the case at all. This seat is very comfortable. I can't believe that this thing's 25 years old. Seat's comfortable, driving position's comfortable. The way the steering wheel sets up to the dash, though, when I first got in it, the first thing I wanted to do was, you know, telescope the wheel out to me, and of course it doesn't do that. So it took me a little bit to kind of get comfortable with how my arms sit in this car, the seating position, and, you know, where my feet are, where my hands are. But I gotta say, this thing is right on the money on how a car should set up in terms of seating position. So comfort is there. I cannot complain about that. A point I will make, the pedals are off to the right. So the pedals are interesting for two reasons. First of all, they're off to the right, which has taken a little bit, I'll exaggerate that, I don't know if you can see my legs, but it's taken a little bit of getting used to kind of twist to the right a little bit. But also the floor-mounted pedals, like, don't underestimate the cool factor of having floor-mounted pedals. All of the cars, with the exception of the O2 that I just picked up recently, have had pedals that are hanging from the firewall, so they go like this. These go like that, and it's very cool. So I appreciate you checking out today's video. You know, I am kind of failing to deliver on my brand promise, which is, hey, this channel is all about BMWs. As you can see, maybe it's not going to be about BMWs. I will be toying with this car. I'm going to be driving this car. I will feature this car in videos, and yet it's a Porsche. So I don't know, man. I don't really know what I'm going to do in terms of what I call the channel. At this point, I don't really care. If you've liked what you've watched and you're into old German car content, you know, I would ask that you subscribe, you know, and hit that bell so that you're notified when I upload new content. So, I appreciate you checking out today's video.